Craniectomy brain surgery. The world had always been a blur of sound and movement for Dr. Emily Carter, a woman whose hands had stitched hope into broken lives for nearly 2 decades. On a cold November morning, she stood before the glass wall of Operating Room 7 at St. Francis Hospital, staring at her reflection in the sterile light. Beyond the glass lay her next patient, a young man named Noah Jensen, 23 years old, once a college baseball player, now lying still beneath layers of tubes and monitors. A week earlier, Noah had been in a devastating car accident. His brain had swollen dangerously against the confines of his skull, and every hour that passed pushed him closer to irreversible damage. The only option left was a craniectomy, one of the most delicate and high-risk procedures in neurosurgery. As Emily scrubbed her hands, she felt that familiar mixture of fear and faith, the silent conversation every surgeon holds between science and God. She had performed hundreds of surgeries, but this one felt different. It wasn't just another patient. It was someone's only son, someone's laughter, someone's future. Inside the operating room, the world narrowed to the rhythm of beeping monitors and the slow inhale of the ventilator. The anesthesiologist nodded. "We're ready, drive, Carter." Emily's voice was calm, though her heart raced like a metronome inside her chest. Scalpel. The first incision broke the quiet, and time began to blur. Hours passed unnoticed as her team worked in perfect synchrony. A portion of Noah's skull was carefully removed to allow the brain to swell safely. Each motion demanded perfection, one mistake could erase a life story. Sweat traced a slow path down her temple beneath the surgical mask. As she delicately adjusted a swelling vein, Noah's vital signs faltered. Pressures dropping, someone called out. The monitor beeped faster, sharper. "Come on, Noah," she whispered under her breath, "stay with me." The room tensed. Then, just as suddenly as it had plunged, the line steadied again. Relief rippled silently through the team. Emily's hands never trembled. Hours later, as the final suture was placed and the skull fragment stored safely for future reattachment, she stepped back, exhausted, her eyes glistening behind the surgical glasses. "He made it," she said softly. But in her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. For days, Noah lay unconscious in the ICU. His mother, Grace Jensen, rarely left his side. She was a petite woman with tired eyes and hands that never stopped praying. Emily visited daily, often after midnight rounds, her voice gentle as she explained each small improvement. "His brain pressure's stabilizing," she said one night, resting a hand on Grace's shoulder. "He's fighting hard." Grace looked up, tears reflecting the fluorescent light. "You saved him, drive. Carter. I don't know how to thank you." Emily smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet. Thank him, he hasn't given up." Days turned into weeks. Thanksgiving passed unnoticed, then Christmas. Snow fell outside the hospital windows like silent prayers. One evening, as Emily entered Noah's room, she found a small folded note taped to the monitor. Grace had written, "Faith is the bridge between what we can't control and what we hope for." Emily stared at the words longer than she expected. They reminded her of her own father, who had died 5 years earlier from a brain tumor, a man who had taught her that medicine was not about fixing people but about walking beside them in their most fragile moments. That night, she sat alone in the cafeteria, sipping coffee gone cold, and wondered if her father would have been proud of the woman she'd become. Then, one January morning, everything changed. Emily entered the ICU to find Grace. Standing frozen, her hands pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Noah's fingers had moved. Then his eyes fluttered open. A nurse gasped. Emily rushed to the bedside. "Noah, can you hear me?" His lips trembled, his voice faint but certain. "Where am I?" It was a moment that suspended the universe. Grace collapsed into sobs, clutching her son's hand. The monitors beeped steadily, like a chorus of tiny miracles. Emily blinked away tears, stepping back quietly, giving the family space to reunite. Outside the room, she leaned against the wall, her chest tight with emotion. She had spent years saving lives, but rarely did she get to witness the spark of rebirth so pure, so fragile. Recovery was slow but steady. Weeks of therapy followed, Noah learning again to walk, to speak, to find his reflection in the mirror. The left side of his skull still bore a curved scar where the bone would one day be replaced. Emily checked on him often, sometimes bringing coffee for Grace, who had become like family. They laughed about small things, hospital food, noisy machines, the way Noah flirted shyly with the physical therapist. Life was returning, piece by piece. But one late afternoon, as Emily reviewed Noah's scans, her brow furrowed. The swelling had subsided beautifully, but she noticed something else, a tiny shadow near the surgical site. It could be nothing, she thought. Or it could be the beginning of a new bleed. Her chest tightened. She had to tell them. That evening, she sat with Grace and Noah in his room, explaining gently what she'd found. It's likely benign, she said carefully, but we'll need to monitor it. I'd recommend another surgery, soon. Grace's face paled. Another surgery. After all he's been through. Noah looked at Emily, his eyes calm and steady. If you think it'll help, I trust you. That trust hit her like a wave. She nodded, swallowing hard. Then we'll do this together. The second surgery was scheduled for the next morning. As Emily prepped, a nurse rushed in with a message. An emergency had just come in. A child, 5 years old, with a severe brain hemorrhage. Only one operating room and team were available, and both patients needed immediate care. Emily's heart pounded. She had to choose. Protocol said the child should go first. His condition was more time sensitive. But that meant delaying Noah's surgery, risking the chance the shadow could worsen. Grace was waiting outside, her eyes full of silent questions. Emily took a deep breath and made her decision. Prep the child. I'll operate on him first. The next 8 hours tested every ounce of strength she had. The little boy, Eli, was the son of a single mother, terrified and alone in the waiting room. The surgery was long and complex, but by evening, Eli's bleeding was controlled. When Emily finally walked out, exhausted and drenched in sweat, the boy's mother fell to her knees, sobbing into her hands, whispering, thank you, God bless you." Emily smiled weakly, her voice hoarse. "He's going to be okay." Only then did she remember, Noah. She sprinted back to prep for his operation, running on nothing but adrenaline and faith. Her team followed without complaint, they'd seen her perform miracles before. But fate can be both cruel and kind. During Noah's second surgery, complications arose. His blood pressure crashed suddenly, and for a moment Emily felt the room tilt. "We're losing him," a nurse cried. The monitors screamed. Emily's hands pressed firmly, her voice breaking through the chaos. "Noah, fight. Please." Minutes stretched into eternity. And then, miraculously, the line on the monitor leveled. He was still there. When the surgery finally ended, Emily slumped against the wall outside the OR, too tired to stand. She thought of Grace, waiting somewhere down the hall, praying. She thought of the little boy, alive because of a decision she'd made. And she whispered into the quiet corridor, "Thank you." Days later, when Noah woke up again, the first person he asked for was Emily. She entered the room, still weary, her lab coat wrinkled from sleepless nights. He smiled faintly. "You did it again," he said. "You saved me." She shook her head. "No, Noah. You saved yourself. I just held the flashlight." Grace reached for Emily's hand. "You saved more than one life that day. I heard about the little boy. I can't imagine how you did both." Emily looked down, humbled. "Because that's what this work is. It's not about choosing who deserves to live, it's about believing everyone does." Months passed, and spring arrived. Noah finally left the hospital, walking slowly but proudly into the sunlight. The staff gathered to watch him go, clapping softly as if afraid to wake a fragile dream. He turned back, his eyes finding Emily's across the lobby. "You gave me a second chance," he said. "I don't know how to repay you." She smiled. "Live a good life, Noah. That's repayment enough." Years later, Emily would receive a letter postmarked from a small town in Montana. Inside was a photo. Noah, standing on a baseball field with a group of children, his scar faint beneath his cap. On the back, he'd written, "Coach Noah's first game. Teaching kids how to never give up. You taught me that." A folded newspaper clipping fell out too. It was about a fundraising event for children with traumatic brain injuries, started by a man named Noah Jensen. Beneath the headline were words that made her eyes sting, inspired by the surgeon who believed every life was worth saving. That night, Emily sat on her porch, the city lights glowing in the distance. The air smelled of rain and renewal. She thought of all the lives that had passed through her hands, the ones she'd saved, the ones she hadn't. Each one had left a mark deeper than any scar. She realized that medicine wasn't just about surgery, It was about love disguised as duty, about the invisible threads that connect one act of compassion to another. She closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer of gratitude, for Noah, for Eli, for Grace, for the sacred privilege of being human enough to care. The next morning, she returned to the hospital as the sun spilled gold across the windows. In the hallway, she passed a nurse humming softly, and for a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. She smiled to herself, thinking of the word Grace had once written on that folded note, faith. Maybe that was the true heart of surgery, not the steady hands, but the belief that beneath every broken skull, every trembling pulse, there still lived a spark of something divine. And so, drive. Emily Carter kept walking, back into the fluorescent lights, back into the quiet battles between life and loss, knowing that somewhere, a boy named Noah was teaching children how to dream again. She would never meet them, but that didn't matter. Because kindness, once sown, travels farther than the hand that plants it. And in every operating room, in every whispered prayer, in every heartbeat that dares to continue, the miracle goes on.